Formula One's Ross Brawn told Motorsport.com that potential changes could be coming to the sprint race format in 2022, potentially making it a standalone race on Saturdays instead of having it decide the grid order for Sunday's Grand Prix. Friday qualifying would determine the starting grid for both sprint and main race instead of letting the sprint race set the grid for the big one. Under the current sprint format, only the podium finishers will receive additional championship points. In a potential change for next year, Formula One would expand the number of drivers eligible for points, but the final decision, as Ross Brawn told Motorsport.com, that's going to be decided over the winter months. After two sprint races now in the books, have your thoughts on this format changed, and are you in favor of those potential tweaks mentioned by Ross Brawn?
I think I'm in favor of anything that isn't what we're doing right now, to be honest. I hate to say that, but we're two sprint races in, and no, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't think that this is something that should determine the grid for the main event on Sunday. And first of all, I feel terribly sorry for Valtteri Bottas. Of course, the 1 week that he would go out and win pole and hold on to the lead in the sprint race is the week that he's going to be starting P20 and dead last on the grid because of the engine changes and grid penalties that are going to come from that. But I feel terrible for Lewis Hamilton. He should be on the front row tomorrow. Instead, he's going to be starting fourth. He's been penalized by a bad start. And because the sprint races are a sprint, by definition, they're so short, there was no time to make that track position up. But Gasly, more than anybody else, one small mistake taking off his front wing, leading to an accident, he should be starting up in the top 5 as well tomorrow. And instead, he's going to be down on the back row of the grid with Valtteri Bottas. And to me, I got a lot of love and respect for Martin Brundle, obviously. He's one of the greats, and, I certainly don't want anybody to see this as a personal attack on him or anything, but, it was kind of silly to me when he said, well, I'd much rather watch this than FP3. That to me doesn't change the fact that, even if you enjoy what we're seeing from the sprint races, I guess that's the whole purpose of them, is to give us something more entertaining than just a third Friday practice session or something like that, whatever it may be. It should not be what determines the championship race's starting grid. One particular idea that I've had, and in fairness, I think I saw it from somebody else on social media as well. I forget if it was Twitter or Instagram or wherever it was. But if you want to have a sprint race, maybe use this as an opportunity for a team's third driver, like a reserve driver, a young development driver or something. Give them an opportunity not just to get behind the wheel of a Formula One car, but simulate what a Formula One Grand Prix actually feels like. And then the fans who like the sprint races would still be getting their sprint race, and the World Championship has there are no implications on the World Championship driver standings or the grid for the World Championship Grand Prix. I said on Twitter after the end of a sprint race, I really hope that, with championship points being decided, with entire grids and lineups being decided, I hope that whoever wins the championship, I know we've got a great championship battle right now between Verstappen and Hamilton. Whoever wins it, I hope it's by more than just a few points, not just because of the farce that we saw in Belgium, but also because of points being awarded here in the sprint race, a confusing format. I just don't like it. And I think back to 2016 when elimination style qualifying was introduced. That didn't go very well. It only lasted a few races, and then Formula One saw that and they reverted back to the traditional format for the rest of the season. I'm wondering if there's enough negative backlash or fans don't seem to like what we're seeing with the sprint races right now. I know Ross Brawn is already floating out some potential changes. Could we maybe see the whole idea scrapped from the third race later this season or in 2022 and beyond? Formula One have been known to look at changes that they've made that haven't gone well in the past and reverse their decision. I'm also thinking back now to what happened after the 2008 championship when you have a title battle between Massa and Hamilton. Massa won more races, but Hamilton won the championship. And they were going to institute a medal system, and whoever won the most races would be the champion by default. And that was so universally hated that it was scrapped before it was ever even introduced. So, I think there's a lot of discussion on these sprint races right now among the fans on social media, and not very much of it is good. So it's going to be interesting to see what the FIA and Formula One decide to do in the future.
Come back, Bernie. All is forgiven. I think that's pretty much what everybody's been thinking. Oh, I tell you what, I don't even know. I don't know anymore. If you remember, the very first time I appeared on the Grid Network, it was just after Silverstone and that sprint race as well. I said at the time, it had its moments, the sprint race. I didn't like it that much, and I was willing to give it another try here at Monza. I enjoyed the first 10 minutes of the sprint race. I was expecting we were going to have slipstream battles. We were going to have cars really pushing hard. And then what happened? The tyres went off. The cars couldn't overtake each other. The DRS wasn't long enough in each straights. And it all went down the drain. I've said it before, and I'm definitely going to say it. I don't dislike sprint qualifying. I hate sprint qualifying. It just doesn't work. Yes, it gives something on every single day. I really enjoyed qualifying on a Friday. I thought that worked quite well. Maybe we can have a look at seeing if we can have a qualifying one maybe on a Friday of some form or another, because I really liked it. It energized Friday. Saturdays just felt like you've been asleep. I mean, I was considering as well just sitting in my chair and having a nap during the safety car periods today. It doesn't work. I woke up this morning, got into the commentary box, delivered 3 great MotoGP sessions across Moto3, Moto2, and MotoGP. They were fantastic. I got to F1's practice too, and I felt, why are we here? We've just had qualifying. We're having a warm-up for a sprint. And what happened? Sainz put it in the wall, and that nearly affected his sprint race as well. It doesn't work. Going into the race today, yes, it was exciting at the start, but as you said, Ben, Hamilton, who's been fastest practice 1, fastest in practice 2 this morning, started second on the grid in the sprint qualifying, now starts 4th on the grid tomorrow. Bottas has got 3 points. That's great, because he probably won't get any points anyway. But does that mean that if sprint races become permanent, are we going to have cars going flat out with new engines to get new penalties as well? Because you're going to start at the back of the grid. So you're going for points on the Saturday rather than the Sunday. That didn't feel fair to me. Bottas has got a brand new engine, brand new exhaust, brand new turbocharger, and he started on pole position for this sprint race. He won this sprint race, and he got 3 points. Now, how's that fair? He's got a penalty. He's broke the rules. He should have started at the back of the grid for the sprint qualifying, or considering that he would start from the back of the grid on Sunday's race anyway, he shouldn't have been allowed to take part in the sprint qualifying. It's disrupting the spirit of things as well. We've now got the situation where Verstappen, he qualified third today. He qualified third in qualifying. He finished second in today's sprint race, but starts on pole tomorrow for the main Grand Prix. How does that work? We've got Bottas now, who took pole twice, but neither of those count on the official record books. Verstappen gets it. We've got Verstappen, who now starts on pole, but only got 2 points. And Ricciardo starts in second. He's only got 1 point, and no points for Lando Norris, who did a great sprint race defending from Hamilton. The system makes no sense. Here's my idea, and I've been thinking about this a lot. You want to have a sprint race, don't call it a sprint race. I commentate on esports a hell of a lot, and we do 18-minute qualifying and then a 50% race. Let's have a qualifying and then let's have a 50% race, 150 kilometers, and let's have it the old points system. You get 10 points for first, 8 for second, and so on down to 8th place. And then we've got an old style point system that the fans loved. We've got a half Grand Prix, which will attract the younger viewers into watching the sport as well. You can even call it Italy 1 and Italy 2. You've just counted towards the World Championship, and then whoever finishes that race, it doesn't matter. You don't get pole. Pole's decided on the Friday. You've done it. The sprint race is on its own, like Ross said, but you change it. You make it part of the weekend. You make it race 1. You make it race 2. Let's add in different tyre compounds. Say you in the sprint race, you can only use medium compound tyres. And then in the main Grand Prix on the Sunday, you have to use all 3, the hard, the medium, and the soft. Let's add in variety. You've got these tyres, you've got these rules, let's use it. You want to spice up the Grand Prix, let's spice up the Grand Prix. Add in these rules, make it work. It just does not work at the moment. We've had 2 of these systems now, and they've been a complete failure as well. And let me tell you something, the people who I've seen applauding it are pundits and influencers on social media. Every fan I've spoken to has hated it. Kobe, I don't know what you make of all this, but it's an absolute nightmare at the moment.
Well, I think nightmare is quite a way to put it, and fans and journalists alike, not really a big fan of the sprint race format that they have in Formula One. I say it works quite well in Formula 2, I believe, but I think Formula 2 should go back to the old layout with one sprint race and one feature race for next year instead of two sprint races and one feature, but that's a story for an entirely different day. And while fans and journalists alike, not really a big fan of this format, the drivers aren't really a big fan of it as well, at least Sergio Perez. Looking at a quote right now at motorsport.com, Sergio Perez, when asked what he thought about the Formula One sprint race format, he says there's nothing happening in it, and I don't see the benefit of having the sprint race. I can imagine it's also boring for the fans, and that's really telling for a driver. If it's boring for the driver, and he's saying it's also boring for the fans, then maybe you have a concept that is completely wrong here. And I believe Formula One should definitely go back to the drawing board, because right now it doesn't seem like the sprint race format is something that fans and drivers alike just aren't interested in. Yeah, you guys brought up some really good points, especially with Valtteri Bottas. If he didn't have that engine penalty, he would have been starting on pole position, and he won the pole for the sprint race and won the sprint race, but he has to start at the back of the grid and nothing to really show for it. And Pierre Gasly, after winning last year's Italian Grand Prix, had a really strong qualifying session for the sprint race, crashed that. Now he's going to be starting P19 on the grid for tomorrow's race. And if it wasn't for this sprint race, he would have been in prime position for tomorrow. And there's definitely a lot of things that can go wrong when we have these sprint races, and not sure what's going to happen next year. Are we going to see the sprint race at select rounds, or are we going to see them at every single race? That's a question yet to be answered.